Welcome to the American Diversity Report podcast. I'm Deborah Levine, your host, an award-winning author and editor-in-chief of the American Diversity Report. Podcasts interviews diverse movers and shakers and change makers around the country. And today we've got a wonderful gentleman with us named Mike Green. He's an award-winning journalist and co-founder of ScaleUp Partners. His passion is to move a 1% needle that has never been moved. If successful, he will change America. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Deborah. Thanks for having me.
A pleasure. I can see that you have ambitious intentions here.
I do indeed. I want to change the world, doesn't everyone?
Of course we do. Not everyone puts it down in writing, though. So tell us, how are you going to change the world? What is this project as ScaleUp Partners about?
Well, it's very interesting. I got into this about 6 years ago. I was a tech entrepreneur, and at the same time, I was coming out of media after a number of years of successful career. New York Times Leadership Academy fellow, worked with Dow Jones as an innovation content manager, and trained in social media with CNN. But for whatever reason, we were stuck in the print protocol. And as much as I was trying to move us into digital, and somewhat successfully, it was just the pace was too slow. So I moved into tech entrepreneurship on my own. And that's when I discovered that there were very few people that looked like me, very few entrepreneurs, very few equity investors, angels, or VCs. And I started writing a series in the Huffington Post called The Innovation Crisis in Black America. And all hell broke loose around me. I got calls from all over the nation. And eventually it turned into, I had to shelve my entrepreneurial, at least the tech entrepreneurship company, and move into social entrepreneurship, and started this consultancy, which has gone through a number of iterations, but today it's ScaleUp Partners, LLC. And one of my co-founders, Jonathan Hollyfield, who is the architect of what we call inclusive competitiveness, he wrote a book recently called The Future Economy and Inclusive Competitiveness. And we have been on this glide path for the past 6 years of paving the road for a economic revitalization of America around economic inclusion and competitiveness, creating systems in communities that help underrepresented populations compete in the new global tech innovation economy. Now, that's a mouthful, but here's the bottom line. We'll make it real simple. My focus is to move a needle of business productivity 1%. And here's what that means. Today, all Black-owned businesses produce less than 1% GDP. And I'll just say that again. All Black-owned businesses, all 2.6 million Black-owned businesses, produce less than 1% of the nation's GDP. That needle has never moved since 1868, when they passed the 14th Amendment and we became Black Americans, or African Americans. When we took on the American citizenship, we were still less than 1% GDP in business productivity, and we have not moved even 1% in 149 years.
Just amazing. And frightening.
I'm going to move that needle. Well, I'm not going to move it by myself, but my goal is to raise awareness, change the economic narrative, and begin a process of catalyzing a movement that will push that needle from 1 to 2. And if we push that needle from 1 to 2, there's a whole lot of things that happen when you do that. Now, if you add in all Hispanic-owned businesses with all the Black-owned businesses, you still barely get to 4%. You're still less than 4% GDP. Now imagine this, in mid-century, by 2050, Black and Hispanic populations here in the United States will be 42% of the total population And 42% of the total population will produce less than 4% of the GDP and almost zero job growth. That is unsustainable for the country. It is unsustainable for our economic competitiveness globally. We must empower underrepresented populations and rural populations as well. We must empower them to be more productive, to be connected to the resources that they need, and to develop the infrastructure and the funding and the investments that they need to tap into the talent pools that already exist, but are just ignored and oftentimes live right next door to innovation ecosystems and don't know they exist.
That's a huge task. How are you planning to do that?
Well, everything starts with awareness. So if you take a look at the 540 Comprehensive Economic Development Strategies plans. Now that's a mouthful. They call it CEDS, C-E-D-S, Comprehensive Economic Development Strategies plans. Every region in the country has one. So no matter where you live, if you look up on Google and find your CEDS, or if you go to the EDA and you put in a search for CEDS, it'll tell you what CEDS is. And if you find the CEDS for your region, it is produced by a regional development organization, and every region in the country has one. And what they do is they forecast for the next 5 years to 10 years, what is the economic environment going to be like in your region. So they're looking at schools, they're looking at housing, they're looking at transportation, they're looking at jobs, they're looking at business growth and productivity, they're looking at quality of life. They have a number of factors, and they call it regional competitiveness. And so these CEDS documents, these CEDS plans, if you read them, none of them include communities of color, none.
How can
and so that's because
they just skip them altogether? They don't count them? This is amazing.
Well, it's amazing, but it's not really that amazing if you think about the country itself. Now, keep in mind that the country itself was built upon a segregated footprint. So it wasn't that long ago that Dr. King was decrying the segregationists in America and the fact that so many communities of color were being left out of the economic productivity of the nation. So businesses and your housing and your education, all of these various different levels of society were all segregated. They still are. They still are. And when Dr. King, and we're here in Black History Month, and most people don't know this, when he wrote his letter from the Birmingham jail, he used the word segregation and the form of the word segregation as in segregationists 18 times in one letter. And we don't use that word today, but if you look around, most of our schools today are segregated. Our business productivity is segregated. Our investments and infrastructure are segregated. So when you look at all the economic strategies plans, you're not going to see communities of color in there. You're not going to see investments to improve their infrastructure. You're not going to see expected business outcomes, nor are you going to see any accountability or responsibility or milestones along the way. And the reason why, because we're a segregated country still, and we haven't dealt with that issue. And until we do, most of the people who are not included in these plans don't even know these plans exist.
So how are you planning on addressing this issue, these plans? Is this something that you're involved with in this venture of yours?
There's good news. There are cities and organizations across the Fruited Plains that are recognizing that inclusion is key. The demographic shifts demand that we begin to invest in our talent pool, all of our talent pool. The workforce is changing. And so you have a myriad corporations and mature businesses and small businesses and entrepreneurship. We have a crisis of entrepreneurship right now across America, but the fastest rate of growth in entrepreneurship is among Hispanic and Black entrepreneurs, and Black women entrepreneurs in particular. They have more than 322% growth rate since 1997 all the way to today. And yet we're not recognizing that we can scale up that type of risk-taking activity, because these are your job creators of tomorrow. Now, in order to do that,
would you for a moment repeat that percentage of new entrepreneurs, Black African American women? I want to hear that one again.
Yeah. 322% rate of growth in entrepreneurship among Black women alone. They own 60% of all Black-owned business. It is not for lack of trying. People are out there trying. They just don't have the resources. So the good news is that people are starting to recognize that. The people in power, the policymakers, and on a policy level, and this is where Jonathan Holyfield lives and breathes. He recognizes that we must change the policies. We must change the strategic planning. We must change the investment in infrastructure. We must provide on-ramps for young people, from at the earliest ages in the pipeline of education all the way through to today. And we must invest in that activity that already exists and scale that activity up, because those are our job creators of tomorrow. And if we can do that, if we can intentionally, where we live, if each of the regional development organizations can intentionally begin the process of including communities of color, they are going to find that there's a lot of activity that they've been overlooking, a lot of business activity, a lot of business opportunity for growth, a lot of opportunity for changing the educational system from this reliance on creating a manufacturing workforce to creating an entrepreneurial and critical thinking, problem solving talent pool that is going to help America become more competitive around the world by solving problems, by being socially aware and concerned, and bringing marketable solutions to the marketplace. We can teach our kids. We can wrap their education around entrepreneurial thinking and critical thinking and problem-solving skills. We can do this. We can make them not make them more creative, but take advantage of their creativity and channel it in a way that helps them become more competitive in an innovation economy.
Well, this is quite an undertaking that you've launched here. What does your average week look like? What do you do?
Well, I work with institutions, organizations, policymakers. I work with actual startups. I work with people who are in the business of developing what the president said in his farewell address, as we believe in we believe in a fair, just, and inclusive America. And I work with people on a daily basis. I have the great fortune to work with people who are actively doing that. I'll give you one example. I'm working with, I'm an advisor to a group of former pro athletes. And if you know anything about the athletic community, you know that there's a lot of activists within. And from the 1967 Muhammad Ali Summit that Jim Brown arranged in Cleveland, Ohio, and you had Bill Russell, you had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you had a lot of the famous athletes of that time come around and support Muhammad Ali in his activist stance. Well, that was 50 years ago, and 50 years later, on a consistent basis, from when you saw John Carlos and Tommy Smith stand up with their hands raised, their fists raised at the 1968 Olympics to signify the shameful condition that Dr. King spoke about in his I Have a Dream speech, to all the way to today when Colin Kaepernick takes a knee to draw attention during the national anthem before each game, to draw attention to this shameful condition that continues to persist in plaguing these communities. These athletes have tried to use and leverage their celebrity status to draw attention to this segregationist society and to begin to address some of these problems, and even taking money out of their own pockets. Ray Lewis and Jim Brown and a number of other folks, with Reggie Howard, who is the CEO of the United Athletes Foundation, they're going into broken down communities and helping to take the people that live there and teach them how to rebuild and renovate their own communities, so that they take pride in it, so that they safeguard those communities and they have money in their pockets and they're economically sound. They're doing this without fanfare, without a lot of media, but it's on the ground and it's hard work. And I'm working with James Donaldson, who is a former NBA All-Star. He's played 16 years in the NBA, 20-year overall basketball career, is the president of the Retired Basketball Association. He recognizes that student athletes these are your competitors. These are your these are young people who occupy a lot of the positions of authority and leadership in the real world. I mean, most of your Fortune 500 executives are former student athletes. So even if you don't make it to the pros, having that relationship between former pros and student athletes and cultivating a landscape of communication between the two, so that they're working on the same problems and trying to solve those problems. This is something that athletes are starting to do. And James Donaldson just started the Athletes Playbook to help parents and students design their success playbook for life, not just in sports, but for life, because they understand how they can affect society and they want to do it in a positive way. So I work with people like this, and I'm thrilled to be able to work with people like this. I work with people like the president, Ron Johnson, over at Clark Atlanta University, who held the very first Economic Inclusion and Competitiveness Summit and brought in Jay Williams, the former deputy director of the EDA, Assistant Secretary of Commerce and deputy director of the EDA, and brought in NASA and Google and a number of other folks to present to their students what the innovation economy really is, and what it entails, because no one's teaching them this. So they did that, and they've been rewarded because they're starting something that is being invested in by the federal government through grants and through corporate support as well. So they've got something going very special, trying to build an innovation hub starting out of Clark Atlanta University in the Atlanta Metroplex. So I find these wonderful people all over the place. Kellogg has invested down in Jackson, Mississippi, where we were a couple of years ago. Baltimore has the Innovation Village. Oakland, Portland, just right up the road from me, about 5 hours. I live in Southern Oregon. Portland, Oregon, which is well known as the whitest city in America, they have some of the most forward-thinking, inclusive strategies that are being cultivated and developed there, leading the country. And, if you go to Portland, Oregon, make sure you talk to Stephen Green, and they're no relation to me, but Stephen Green is at the vortex of everything that's inclusive. And one guy can make a difference. He's one guy, and he's made such a tremendous difference in a mid-range large city like Portland, Oregon, and changed it from just focusing on the segregated parts to how those segregated parts can come together and become a whole. I'm telling you, I'm excited for what's laid ahead, even though we do have some national politics going on that kind of a little scary.
So, given the national politics and the environment that we're working in presently, what advice can you give our listeners who are very diverse for the future, for following your vision, which will help us all? What would you say?
Well, I think that information is key. Because when you have a segregated society, the first thing that happens is that people who are not in the know end up being economically starved, economically deprived of resources, They become more or less second-class citizens. By the time they can see something happening, it's too late. The strategies, the plans, the infrastructure, the investments, all that took place years ago. And so creating awareness, and it's one of the reasons why at ScaleUp Partners we've introduced inclusiveamerica.com. And it's a platform we just put up. It hasn't been up very long. We're still raising some money to build out the infrastructure. But just like the president says, we want to build a fair, just, and inclusive America. But one of the problems is that everyone isn't aware of what other people are doing, and there's so much stuff happening out there that just can't penetrate the national media or even the regional media. And so what we want to do is we want to create a platform whereby everyone can tell their story of what the work that they're doing, how they are doing things in their individual capacity or as an organization or as an institution or as a foundation, what they are doing to build a more inclusive America. And we want to be able to highlight those stories, profile those people, give them a platform so that we can all come together as one and begin to collaborate and work with one another and support one another to actually make that dream come true, whereby there's opportunity for all in an inclusive America.
Well, I really thank you, and I'm going to be in touch about that new platform, and we're going to talk about it and how we can maybe collaborate to make that happen. I admire all that you're doing and wish you all the best, and I look forward to maybe having a follow-up session somewhere later in the year to see how you're doing and what you're doing. I hope that's possible. So, yes.
I'm really happy to have had this opportunity, Deborah, and I look forward to working with you in any capacity you'd like. And I'm just excited about where we're headed, and I just hope to accelerate the pace.
Well, I'm with you on that. So we'll talk, and together we will change the world.
I love it. Thank you again.
A pleasure. Thank you again, my listeners. We will be back soon.